Welcome to this lesson where we're going to learn how to write prompts, not just for ChatGPT, but any AI assistant model like Claude or Poe that you're working with. So in this lesson, we're going to learn what are prompts, what are the 3 prompts to a prompt, what are best practices, and then we'll do some examples. So let's begin. What are the 3 parts to a prompt? Using this 3-part structure really helps people get a really good response without having to go through multiple revisions or multiple chats trying to get the best answer. We're trying to do in as few prompts as possible, get the best quality response out to save us time at the end of the day. So most people make the mistake of just being very brief or very generic and not providing enough context for the model to understand what are you looking for exactly. Because remember, underneath the hood, these models are just they auto predict the text, or they predict the next word or sentence most likely that is in this example, based on a large training set of data. So the more information that you can feed it, the more it could use that to try and put together a much more quality response. That is what you're looking for example. The first part is we want to provide some context or a role for the ChatGPT to know where are we starting from. The models, you want to think of them kind of like employees, but I like putting them in the context of a college intern that I want to complete a task, for example. So with this college intern, the first thing I want to do is give it some context or role so that it knows what type of response or how to act in the future. So we're going to give it a role like you're a marketer, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're a copywriter, for example. That's going to put together the persona and provide much more context around how would a copywriter answer, for example. The second is you want to provide a detailed instruction. This is your task or your question for the model to answer. Most people make the mistake is they are too broad with the question, or it's too complex of a task. For example, write me a whole blog post about XYZ topic. That's too big of a task for the model to output. Instead, you want to focus on what I call micro tasks. We'll go into another lesson to practice micro tasks, but you want to break down your request to very small parts that you could piece together in your digital notebook to get a much better response. You're not trying to get the perfect and the whole blog post or a whole chapter of a book out from a model. You're trying to work like a college intern, piece by piece, task by task, so that over time you can build the best output, for example. So we're going to focus on the task. And lastly, what is the format that you're looking for as the response? Do you want a bullet list? Do you want a table? What are you looking for exactly? Even providing examples or a framework for the model to replicate. Because once you provided examples, the style of a writing, here's an example of a Facebook ad, for example, then it knows exactly what to return for you, for example. So for example, and I have 2 examples here. This is a great example for a prompt. You are a biology teacher. Great. So it knows the context, the role. It's in a teacher role. Great. Explain photosynthesis. Say I'm learning about it. I want to really understand this new topic, regardless of what it is. I just want to understand it. And then third, what's the format? I want it to use bullet points and simple language. So we're going to test the 2 different examples of this prompt. So on the left-hand side, I did a very basic, this is an example of a very poor prompt. It's just saying no context, no format, and just a very simple or very short, brief task that just says, explain photosynthesis. Well, what we got out seems like a Wikipedia article, almost like. It's not human. It's like, this is great if I was studying for a biology degree, but honestly, after reading this, great, I got a lot of facts, but I don't really truly understand what is photosynthesis just from reading this. Like light absorption, you have the water splitting, which is this technical term, a lot of technical jargon. I don't understand how the technical jargon I can relate to. For example, I just wanted very simple understanding of what is photosynthesis. It even gives me a whole equation. I didn't ask for an equation. So then I would have to waste time going back and forth, going, no, that's not what I want, or translate that, or explain like I'm five. Like that would be a waste of a good prompt. So remember, a really good prompt, we want to provide those three parts. So here's an example of same example, but a much better, higher quality prompt. Now I'm giving it a role and context saying you are a biology teacher. Explain photosynthesis, that's the task. And now I'm being very explicit as far as the output that I want. Use bullet points and simple language with an analogy to understand for a 5-year-old. So now I got this much better output that says, photosynthesis explained. You see, plants are like little chefs. Plants need some special ingredients in order to make food. The leaves are the kitchen. The magic happens in the leaf. Here's the recipe. Here's the food. And here's an analogy of understanding what is photosynthesis. I could understand this. I could read this and go, yes, I now have a better understanding in the first shot, what is photosynthesis, for example. Let's take it a step farther, for example. Let's say this is an example of a poorly written prompt. Write a Facebook ad for my fitness business that serves men over 60. Look at the response I got. It's not human. It's not human as far as like easy to understand or read. It reads like a Wikipedia article. It's very verbose. I can't relate to this if I'm using this ad to generate leads, for example. Are you feeling the aches and pains of getting older? Want to stay active and strong without the risk of heavy lifting? It just doesn't connect. It doesn't. This will be if I were to run traffic using this ad, it would not perform very well. And look at all the things that it gave me. And then look at this. Take the first step towards a healthier, more vibrant you. Well, I didn't want all this. This is not what I'm looking for. And now I have to go back and forth and chat with it to like try and get a better response. So that's an example of a poorly written prompt. Let's use the same prompt and let's use our 3 steps, for example, to improve that same prompt. Give it a role. You are a marketing copywriter. Awesome. Whatever task that you give it, you want to think of what person in what department of the business, marketing, sales, operations, finance, who would be doing this task. And that's a great place to start with. Or who would I hire as an expert to answer this question for me? For example, you're a doctor, a lawyer, therapist. So we want to be very specific about the role. So you're a marketing copywriter. Great. Now let's do the task. Write a Facebook ad using this framework. The opening line that captures their attention, addressing their biggest pain point that keeps them up at night. 3 benefits of our coaching program with a call to action, and then also translate it for average Joe. So now in one prompt, I got this much better output that says, are you struggling with joint pain and feeling like heavy weights are your only option? Well, discover our fitness program designed specifically for men in their 60s that doesn't rely on heavy lifting. Gentle exercises, increased energy, personalized support. If I ran paid ads and compared option A and option B, I guarantee I will get a higher conversion, meaning more people will click on this ad because it's easy to understand, it has much more context, and this will get a much better conversion than the first one. So this is why you want to use the 3-step framework for writing an example prompt. Now, I provided a cheat sheet that you could download and reference. So at the very top, and this is just a very good best practice. It's not mandatory for every request. It always depends on the task that you're working on. But here we have our very simple format. Say, hey, acting as a role, and let's take a look at some list of examples of roles. You are a marketer, you're an advertiser, you're a copywriter, because you want to treat ChatGPT or Claude or any of these AI models like personal assistants that you want to give a task to, for example. That's the best way to treat them. You're a marketer, you're an advertiser, you're an accountant, you're a lawyer. So now that it has a role, then you want to be very explicit and detailed in the tasks and also breaking down to what I'm calling the micro task. What that means is not having to write the whole blog or essay in one go, I want to work on just the headline. Then I want to work on the book outline, for example. Then I want to just work on the first title of my product description before I move on to the body of the paragraph, for example. So the more you could break it down into smaller micro tasks and using your digital notebook with this, and we'll go into an example in the next lesson with micro tasks, that's going to help me work through and get a much more higher quality output than going back and forth, for example. And then being very explicit, providing an example or a template for the model to know what you're looking for is going to know what to provide you as the answer, for example. So like here, for example, I was very explicit to say, hey, I want my ad using this framework: opening line, biggest pain points, 3 benefits, and a simple call to action. I was very explicit in what I wanted as the output, for example, and I got a much better, higher quality response. So those are the 3 parts to creating a prompt. Let's go over best practices. Some best practices is you want to be very specific and clear in your instructions. Most people are just very generic, very short. These models need a lot of context and information in order to provide you a much more higher quality output, for example. If you can, provide any context or examples, like here's an example letter, match the tone. Here's an example code, a function that I'm working on, create something like this. Or, hey, I'm working on a Facebook ad targeting this demographic, and I really like this format as my ad structure. Help create another ad that uses this structure or framework. Number 3 is probably the most important, and we'll dedicate a lesson just to that, is breaking down complex tasks into smaller micro tasks. So remember, I like the essay as an example. I'm not going to have ChatGPT write a whole academic paper or essay all in one prompt. That's too big of a prompt or task for the model to work on. You'll get an answer that's very verbose, very repetitive, very generic, and not useful in your final output or your final task shipping it, for example. So then you want to break it down into something smaller, like working on the outline, then working on the first chapter using references, or the first paragraph using these examples and your own text or your own words, for example, to have it clean up, for example. Treat it like a personal assistant. Don't have the intern assistant do the work for you. You still have to be the expert. So that's where people don't make the mistake, is relying on the model to do the work for them. No, you provide some context, some information, and have it complete a task with that information. Then iteration. Don't expect to get perfect right out the go. Remember, my check is there 80% something here I could work with? That's my first check whenever I get a response. If not, go ahead. Don't feel bad. You just have to refine the prompt. Just continue to ask it more questions to it, so it gets, you're not trying to get the whole thing. Just get 80%. If it just did the bottom part, for example, really well, but I don't like how it did the first sentence, I'm not going to throw it away and have it try and rewrite the whole thing. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my digital notebook as a text editor to save what I like. So if I just like this bottom part, I'm going to highlight it, Command C, or right click copy. I recommend getting comfortable with Command C as keyboard shortcuts. And I'm in Notion in my digital notebook where we left off. I'm just going to indent new line just as a new section, and I'm going to paste that there, because maybe I didn't like that first sentence. I'm like, okay, now let's rewrite, let's copy this, and let's feed that back to ChatGPT to say, hey, write 5 better headlines than this, paste. So we're I'm giving it back some information to focus on, and I'm giving it a clear instruction for what I want, for example. And now, based on what I'm looking for, it's like, hey, 80% there. I'm like, yeah, that's about 80%. That's good enough. I could take this, copy, and move it into my notebook to tweak and be like, you know what? I think we're going to do this one. Gentle, effective workouts. And we could save these for later, because maybe I want to change those. And you know what? I don't even need that first sentence. I like just this sentence right here. Get fit after 60 without lifting heavy weights. That sounds great. You really want to use your text editor to do all the final work of tweaking and editing before you ship. You never, ever, ever want to take whatever the ChatGPT model is, like, or whatever it outputs, like this whole thing. You're like, yeah, done. It did the whole work for me. I don't have to think. That's being very, very lazy. So take what you like, put it in your text editor, and do your final tweaking from there. You still have to be the expert in it. Second, experiment with different phrasing or formats. Maybe you have to go back to the original prompt. So for example, if I go back and I'm like, yo, if ChatGPT just completely missed the mark in what I was looking for example, if I'm like, whoa, this is definitely not what I'm looking for, then I could go back to my prompt, click the edit message, and say, no, definitely was completely off. I can't use any of that. Translate for average Joe, for example. I could click send, and it will redo that prompt again. You'll also lose any conversation below it, so just be aware of that. And I'm like, okay, these are a lot better. And you can always use the arrows to compare your first response from your next response to see which one do you like better. You never try to get it perfect right out the bat. You do have to work with these models to get the best response out. And you're like, yeah, this is good enough. So you could always edit your original message to make sure you get something out that's 80% there that you could then put in your digital notebook to edit after. Lastly, save prompts for repeat tasks. This is awesome. Say ChatGPT, here we go. Say ChatGPT gives you a great ad. You're like, great, I have an ad. I'm like, man, I've worked back and forth, did a lot of tweaking. I'm like, I really like how this format is. I want to use this prompt again in the future, but I wasn't too clear in my prompt. I could have done better, for example. So turn ChatGPT into a prompt engineer to give you a prompt that you can use in future if you have to repeat this task again in the future. Here's a great example. You are a prompt engineer. I like the output of the response. Write me a template prompt so I can create Facebook ads that match this format for any business in the future. So then it took that prompt in that example and it gave me a great prompt template that says, oh, address the main pain points, great, discover a product or service, awesome, benefit 1, benefit 2, benefit 3, don't let pain point, and here's a call. I really like this, so I'm going to copy this, highlight and copy. I'm maybe going to copy the whole thing up there. Great, copy. And remember, your AI cheat sheet, if you find some prompts that you like, for example, favorite prompts, you can paste those prompts there, so that in the future, you can just copy this into a prompt, give it some more context, and get a much better quality output that you can repeat tasks in the future, for example. So that's where this is your AI cheat sheet, remember? Has your tools, has your prompts, so it's super helpful for you to work on or work from. So let's end with some tasks. So I provided 2 example prompts here that you could copy and paste, or you could write. I would actually write them out. I don't want you to just copy paste. I want you to actually write it out so you get the habit of writing it. And it says, you are a marketer for my life coaching business. Remember, that's the role. Write a detailed ideal customer profile for my clients who are men in their 30s who suffer from anxiety, and provide their demographics, their interests, top 3 pain points, and 3 lead magnets to offer for free. Great. I want you to type this out so you could go into the habit of actually working. You can also use speech to text, for example, if you're on a Mac. Here's a second example I want you to practice. For example, you're a sales rep for my legal business that creates trust for seniors. I lose sales due to the lead saying that my prices are too high. So provide a list of responses that explain the value of my services that is easy to understand to help move the lead to a sale. Great. Once you practice those and you tweak and you get comfortable writing them out, now I want you to come up with your own examples. So referencing the cheat sheet above, and that's this cheat sheet right here, for example, referencing that, I want you to come up with 5 prompts for both focusing first on business, and you can focus on different departments to get some variety, like what's a prompt for marketing, what's a prompt that could help sales, what's a prompt to help in customer service, or maybe to even come up with new products or services, for example. And then I also want you to write 5 new prompts also for life situations. Hey ChatGPT, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're a therapist, you're help me plan a trip, help me create a meal plan, help me create an exercise program, help me learn a new topic. Something in your life that you can use the three parts framework to get a really good prompt. Now, of course, I'm always going to caveat doctors don't trust anything that comes out as medical advice. Don't put personal information in it. Just make stuff up, for example. But I want you to put come up with 5 examples for business and life using the three-part framework. Act as a role, perform a task, and give me this as a format so that you could get comfortable with how to write prompts. That's the end of this lesson. I'll see you in the next lesson.